Okay, so welcome to, what is this, episode 13 of the podcast. After 4 months or whatever of doing this, getting a few under our belt. Thanks for coming back on, Shrita, and discussing Tolkien with me. So, how have you been? And
of course,
what's been happening?
Oh, nothing much. I've been well, and it's things are slightly opening up again. So
I've got my
You got your what?
I've got my COVID vaccine next week. So, or the first one.
Nice.
Anyway,
Nice.
I'm a bit worried because
which brand are you?
That's the AstraZeneca one.
Nice.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing about your blood clot next time.
Yeah, I'm really scared. So I'm like, should I perhaps wait for the Pfizer one, because we don't have that yet because the government bungled the whole thing. But but I'm sort of like, well,
I think you'll be fine.
I just want to get it, and if I feel weird, Did you have the Pfizer, or what did you have?
Yeah, I had the Pfizer,
okay.
And I just had my dose number 2 about a week and a half ago. So
I think if I can, I'll try and get the Pfizer as the second dose. Yeah.
Can you do that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can if they ever get any of them. Yeah, any of it.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So hopefully that'll be.
I know people were really a lot of people I know were talking about sort of being knocked out for the day after.
Yeah.
In terms of their side effects, but it really was not that bad. I mean, I felt a bit under the weather, but I was able to sort of go about and do everything like normal. Yeah. So
I've got it on Thursday night, so hopefully Friday will be okay, and then there's the weekend, of course. So hopefully I'll be recovered by the Monday.
The trick is to just come home from the vaccine appointment and pick up a bottle of scotch or something like that.
True, yeah.
On the way, so in case anything bad happens, you can preempt it by giving yourself a perfectly controllable hangover.
Absolutely,
whatever vaccine side effects you have, you know what to do with the hangover that you give yourself. That's how that works.
I'll take that under advisement. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's coming up, but a little bit, not hesitant, but the blood clot thing had me worried. But that's 1 in 40,000. I don't know. It seems like
I think it's even fewer than that. I really wouldn't worry about it. And I think, at least in the case of the Johnson & Johnson, which I looked up, it was all like the 6 or 7 cases that were recorded had pre-existing conditions. Not like they had conditions that were there were conditions that affected the circulatory system. So I think they were prone to blood clots anyway. Like I know one person had some sort of thyroid issue, and other people were obese. And it's not great, but I think you'll be fine. I mean, you're 30. You seem to be young, good looking, and healthy enough. So I think you're fine, man.
I feel so good now. Well, that's good to know. I appreciate the confidence. So no, it should be right. I'll be fine.
Yeah. We can print this record on a vinyl and frame it if something goes horribly wrong 2 weeks from now.
Oh God. No, exactly. So that's coming up. But so I don't know what else. What have you been reading? Are you still reading that biography? I think you were
of Da Vinci.
Yeah. You're still getting through that, or?
I am still making my way through that slowly but steadily. Though I'm now finally all close to being done with it.
Right.
The book that I've mainly been reading is a book called The Peregrine by J.A. Baker. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've heard of it. Yes, I haven't read it though. But I read a blog about it somewhere. I can't remember. But apparently it's quite popular among philosophical circles. Is it, or something like that?
I think so, actually. Yeah. The reason I came across it is because for the last year or so, I have been very much getting into the films of Werner Herzog.
Ah, yes.
the Bavarian filmmaker, and he has been quoted in some interviews saying, the book that everyone needs to read. The two books that everyone needs to read are the Georgics by Virgil, and the Peregrine by J.A. Baker. And I finally got around to starting to read it, and it is actually quite wonderful. I mean, it's a beautifully descriptive naturalist work. So that's something that I wasn't expecting, because I was going into it expecting a lot of sort of philosophical, metaphysical ramblings, quite frankly, and there is some of that, but I think something that's left out in the usual sort of talkings about it is that Baker was actually really great at just observing things, and for about 7 months, I think, from September to about April, he just follows a couple of peregrine falcons through their hunting season, and most of the novel is just him writing it with beautiful prose about how they interact with their surroundings, and actually my interaction with it is mainly as a work of naturalist writing, rather than philosophical writing. Yeah. Though that part of it is quite beautiful too. There's some element of he undergoes a sort of like transubstantiation, where he sort of almost writes as if he's becoming the falcon, and there's this element of one, as an artist, one does not judge one subject. One tries to become one subject, and there's all that. But even if you have no metaphysical leanings whatsoever, I think there's a lot to be enjoyed in this, and just the descriptions of the estuaries and the sunsets and the winds and the rains and the other birds. So it is quite a remarkable piece of writing that I'm surprised is not more famous than it is.
Perhaps I'll have to pick that up somewhere. Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, I highly recommend
nice.
it.
Yeah.
What about you?
Very good. What am I reading at the moment? I just started reading Sean Carroll, who's a cosmologist. You may have heard of him. His book called oh God, what's it called? It's. I'm just going to look it up.
This is Sean Carroll, the host of the Mindscape podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he talks about his idea of that's right, the big picture on the origins of life, meaning the universe. Yeah, that's the one. He has this idea of poetic naturalism, which sort of seeks to combine sort of naturalism as a worldview, and also the idea that explanation and experience is not really, I suppose, grounded in or reducible to the smallest elements, atoms and stuff. That there is something real in this, in the perhaps the larger, or a larger view of life that takes into account human psychology, but also morality and aesthetics things. So I guess it's not a new idea, but I do like his coining it and his sort of the way that he puts it. So I've just started that, so that should be interesting to get through. Yeah, but we'll see how that goes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I quite like Sean Carroll.
Yeah, he's interesting physicist and thinker in general.
And how did he coin this?
Poetic naturalism is what he. Yeah.
Poetic naturalism. That's nice. Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm curious how this shakes out. I look forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah, I'll let you know. And I finished my Lord of the Rings reread. So.
Oh wow, nice.
Done. Obviously, if we come back to parts of it, I'll read parts of it. But for now, that's probably the last read through I'll do for quite a while. I do like to come back to it fully every few years. What else? I'm also just reading Children of Hurin again, because why not? Because we talked about it, and I sort of got I don't know. It's a fairly short book, so I was moved to read that again, and then so after that's my Tolkien rereading done for a while, I think. But apart from
nice.
whatever you read for this, but Yeah.
But that's not necessarily, reading
No,
just for pleasure,
No, that's right. Yeah. So
I never quite got that phrase.
I do love that book, and it's great. But
I saw you tweeted something about it.
Oh, probably.
I scrolled right by it because I'm a horrible person. But
terrible.
Here, I'm going there now. I know, right? Oh, I see something about Sean Carroll's book.
Oh yes, I quoted a passage.
Oh yeah, I see now.
Photograph. I took a photograph actually. Yeah.
Right. Very old school. I appreciate that a lot.
Yes, it's an actual,
very analog.
Actual paperback.
You didn't just take a screenshot of your fucking Kindle or something. No, you got the dead trees and you got the picture to prove it.
Yep.
So
tree myself.
Yeah. You should just move to Texas already. You had such an oddly homoerotic moment from Tolkien's Children of Turin.
Yes. Yes, this tweet got no likes or anything. I was very sad. I was like, but this is such an interesting.
I just hit the heart on it now.
I have
I saw it. I thought I want to ask you about it on the podcast. So
yes.
Did you want to sort of elaborate at all?
Oh well, it's just this particular moment in the book when Turin is what is he doing at this point? It's towards the beginning of the book, and he's returning to I don't know. He's fostered in an elvish kingdom. He's returning to the main capital city, if you like. It's a cave, but whatever. It's a big cave where the elves live. And I'm trying to explain this in a way that doesn't make it sound ridiculous, but anyway. And so he's returning there, and then he's insulted by one of the elves who lives in the kingdom. Doesn't like him because he's a mortal. They sort of have a bit of a bias against mortals, apparently. And it's just this. And then the next morning, the elf ambushes Turin on the way out again when he's sort of traveling away. And there's a fight, and there's just this weird sort of moment when I don't know if you think it seems homoerotic. I don't know. What did you think when he gets his sword out and strips him naked?
It certainly seems that way once I read it. I did not. I have to say I didn't catch it when I was listening to the audiobook.
That's fair enough.
Probably just because I don't know. I think there's something with audiobooks where you really only are half listening.
Yes, yeah.
Or at least I am.
No, I think that's
it's kind of like that with podcasts too.
Yeah.
It lends itself to conversation because you only really need to be half listening for conversations. But for actual books, I think this is a great example of why you should actually read something because
true.
Reading it, it totally does feel. It feels very homoerotic. And
he puts the sword in Cyrus's butt, and it's just really weird.
Yeah.
It's such an odd little detail. It's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess the intention would be to shame him, but so maybe it's, I don't know, but there's no.
No, but it's like Shakespeare, right? I mean, there are many homoerotic moments that if you read the play literally. You can always find an explanation for why it is not homoerotic, and people have done that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that subtext isn't there, and to some degree, at some point, you really just have to be willfully trying not to read into it to miss it. I mean, like throwing him to the ground and stripping him, and felt Turin's great strength and was afraid, but Turin let him up, and then this is, I think, what clinches it. Run, mocker of woman.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those things where one can rationalize it if one must. But I think the subtext is pretty clear, and I think it's a lovely moment to catch, and it's one of those things that I put in my imaginary notebook of things to sort of bring up with people who are hardcore sort of Tolkien Catholicists, you know.
Tolkien Catholicists, yeah, I like that.
I just made that term up.
I mean, I don't know. The Children of Hurin as a book is generally ignored anyway by most such readers.
Okay, fair enough.
Because, well, I mean, I think so because it just doesn't fit with the rest of it very well, you know, in terms of its ethic. I mean, we talked about that in the podcast that we did on it.
Right.
I'm sure we'll come back to it again, but I think it's it's a bit, it's inspired by, as I said there, you know, it's inspired by different kind of mythological background, I suppose. The Finnish background, and also the Norse to an extent. I think even on my reread of Lord of the Rings this time, I think I said in the episode that we did on that Lord of the Rings really is Tolkien's most, in a sense, people aren't wrong who call it Catholic, because I really think there he tries most audaciously, if you like, to really try and instantiate, if not quite Catholic, then at least a sort of a virtue ethics in his characters. And I think sometimes it does come off as a little, I don't know, inauthentic or unbelievable, even if we consider it to be, you know, even if we think about it as a kind of retelling of history, it still kind of reads awkwardly, just in places, especially Aragorn towards the end when he's becoming king and all of this. I think the sort of the way that he's sort of praised so intensely, and sort of it reads almost like propaganda written by someone in his, like, one of his descendants or something.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
But I feel like Tolkien's, you know, he's just really trying to sort of use this figure as a kind of, I don't know, representative or symbolic of certain virtues, and it comes across as a little too sincere, perhaps, towards the end.
Yeah,
but
I remember feeling that way a little bit when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I was reading it that this is not just that this may be like the, you know, the great thing that he did, but this is not the it's not as subtle or as beautiful as his, you know, in the entire sort of output of his literary work could be. And maybe that's a good transition into Ross Douthat's article that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. I mean, this article's from his Substack. Of course, everyone has a Substack, although I'm not getting one, not unless I become famous and they offer me billions of dollars to begin with. But this article,
I will say I think Substack is a good place to just use as a blog, you know.
Oh, true. Yeah, for sure.
I think that the sort of the word on the street is, you know, you got to have a Substack if you're canceled, or if you're going to have like some sort of $1 million newsletter. But in terms of like just places to blog, even if no one's reading.
It's like anything with a Pareto distribution, right? There'll be some small number of people who, you know, occupy 90% of the reading or writing space or whatever. Is that the right? Yeah,
right.
That's the right use of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
And most
you're talking to an entertainer, so you know, you probably want to ask someone with a bit more scientific cred than me. But I think you're right.
I know, I heard Jordan Peterson talk about it. I mean, not that I really like him particularly, but yeah. Anyway, let's go there. Anyway, so this article is on Ross's blog, and of course I should say Ross Douthat is a New York Times columnist, and we were saying just before we started recording, he's kind of one of those token conservatives the New York Times still has on. He's kind of a centrist in some respects.
On this podcast, you should probably clarify. You mean token as in Token.
Yes, token. Yeah, not Tolkien.
Not
Token.
token as
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's.
You tripped me up for a second.
Right. I think it's different enough in my accent. I think, right?
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. I just heard that. I was like, wait, the New York Times has on retainer a couple of token conservatives?
No. So token Tolkien. I don't know. It's different.
Oh, yeah. All right, fair enough.
But
My bad.
no, it's fine. Good point. But no, token conservatives. And I don't know. I guess he's kind of weird enough, sort of trad Catholic. So it's like, there's a certain level at which I guess perhaps people treat him and his ideas as kind of ridiculous, faintly silly. So and so perhaps they put up with him. They tolerate him. Where he actually, alt-right or something, I very much doubt he would have employment. So, but anyway, he also seems to have an interest in fantasy literature, and so he's written a few things over the years about fantasy. And he wrote a column back when Game of Thrones came out, and when it finished, rather, and bemoaning the terrible final season. Pardon me, final seasons. Yeah, that was an interesting piece, and he sort of follows it up with this recent piece on Substack, which he's talking about the upcoming prequel shows for the Tolkien universe, of course, which you talked about, and also the prequel Targaryen show in the Martin universe, which sounds boring, to be quite frank, and probably won't watch it. But anyway, he sort of suggests in this. Well, he's suggesting a few things, but I guess the main point is just one that a lot of people have made, which is that, well, it's going to be hard to adapt, a story that has. At its core, not a novel, but a series really of notes or summaries of the world building and the history, presented as I've said before, like presented as kind of very distant retellings of events. So, of course, the writing team will have to make up a script. The story, a proper sort of depth of character. They'll have to make up a lot of characters, full stop, etc. And to that extent, I agree with it. But I guess there are a couple of interesting points that he made that, I just thought might be interesting to talk about. He says in his article, he says that his initial reaction is that the bad ideas, as I mentioned, because they're adapting a property rather than a story. I agree with that to some extent, but he says that there is an existing narrative structure in Tolkien's Silmarillion. But then he says this, and this is really what I want to talk about. This.
Wait, sorry. Before you get into that,
yeah.
I have that highlighted because I didn't. This may be stupid, but I didn't quite understand what he meant by that.
Which one? The property, adapting a property.
Yeah. Because so he said because they're adapting a property rather than a story, blah blah blah. But narrative structures aren't the same thing as actual storytelling or character development.
Yeah, that's
the
exactly
kind that the LTR. So is that really stupid to me that I don't understand what exactly he means?
Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about when he says this.
Okay, fair enough.
Narrative structures. Yeah. No, that's right. That's great because I think we've obviously honed in on the same thing here, which is this idea. He says, and I'll quote it. So, quote, he says, narrative structures aren't the same thing as actual storytelling or character development of the kind that Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones novels offered to their adapters. So these projects will only succeed if their screenwriters can effectively graft a richer story onto the outline supplied by the historical materials, which is basically what I've said. And then he sort of says, well, couldn't they adapt some other fantasy stories? And he links to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which is a fantasy novel that's kind of moderately well known, I guess, in fantasy circles, but certainly not beyond that.
I'd never heard of either of the things that he linked to.
I tried reading the first novel of that. I don't know if it's a trilogy but I just got halfway through and I've tried reading it twice. I just could not get into it. But But we've talked about before how I guess neither of us are really actually fantasy readers. So I think one thing to talk about here is that Douthat is approaching this as an adaptation, I should say, of fantasy stories. And as I've said before, I feel like Tolkien's work is it's not in the same. It ought not be considered a part of that genre in the modern sense, right? What he was really doing was he was creating pseudo history. And I guess Martin has tried to do that, I think, much less successfully. But anyway, that's another issue. Yeah. But Tolkien is really trying to create a pseudo history, and as part of that, he develops these. How does he put it? Narrative structures. But I think that sort of misunderstands, or perhaps undervalues what sort of material there actually is. And I really disagree with this notion that narrative structures aren't the same thing as actual storytelling or character development. Because I think even though the narratives, for example, in the Silmarillion are not novelistic in character, they're not they're not developed to the same, I guess, on the same level as obviously the Lord of the Rings is, which partakes much more fully in the kind of conventions of the novel. But I would really query this notion that actual storytelling is only to be encountered, in some sort of heavy, long novel like Game of Thrones, which, of course, the fantasy genre is now known for. Sort of almost above anything else, these tomes, these enormous book series. So I don't know what you would think of that. I think there's a few thoughts there, but
yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that it really does seem to be that the modern fantasy genre seems to be the most salient feature about it is how long everything is, and really does not need to be. It's not like these are Proustian novels.
No, many of them are not of that quality, shall we say?
No, not quite. I don't think I think of the Monty Python sketch of summarized Proust. I think if we did a summarize memory, sorrow, and thorn contest, I don't think the comedy would quite be there, because I think it would actually be quite easy to do in about a minute, as opposed to Proust, which is if length is to be worth anything, it ought to be irreducible, which I don't think is necessarily true for a lot of modern fantasy. But before I spend too much time just sort of hating on that, I think it's interesting that he seems to align Lord of the Rings with, or just in general, like the whole Tolkien world with that, because I really don't think that Tolkien was thinking in terms of I guess I don't know. I don't know how much Tolkien was thinking in terms of concepts like narrative structures or storytelling or character development. I think he was thinking in terms of other things. It's not like he had no abstractions and that his work is totally irreducible, but these seem to be sort of modern. They seem to be sort of inventions of the sort of modern, like, mature storytelling arts, that we have right now. And I don't know that, like, if you analyze, let's just take the Lord of the Rings. If we analyze them in terms of something like character development, I think they would be a disaster, right? Like, what exactly is the character development of Aragorn? It's trying to sort of fit these things into terms that I don't necessarily think they were conceived in.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's the best way for one to analyze them as. And just because because I think with the Lord of the Rings and with Middle Earth in general, I think the reason I like them is that the thing that is of primary importance seems to be style. It seems to be the style of the prose and the stylization of reality, the stylization of both our reality and his own reality seems to be of primal importance. And it's not these sort of like the banalities of things like storytelling, character development, these things that people like Hollywood scriptwriters look to write their their successful sequels. So it seems to be that and that's why Tolkien lasts. The way that something like Lolita lasts. What exactly is the character development of Humbert Humbert? It's non-existent. These are not they're things that people walk around saying are important for fiction, but they're not really. If you think about great fiction, or like let's take Leopold Bloom. What is the storytelling and character development of Leopold Bloom in Ulysses? You'll find that there's a bit of something to talk about in terms of character development, but in terms of storytelling, it's just it's just one man walking around Dublin for a day. So it's not, I don't know if you get what I'm saying here, but it seems like Tolkien is operating on a different level, and he seems to be trying to bring a level of analysis that's quite a bit lower too. It's more worthy of like young adult novels or fantasy fiction, but it just doesn't work here. And he's trying to discredit the upcoming series, perhaps, or something on.
I mean, it's certainly true that it's certainly true that it's certainly true that of course the series will need characters, and being a television show will need scripts and things that of course were not written by Tolkien himself and are not even really alluded to in any of the stories, because most of these stories from this period are not based in conversations or, as we said, that close character development or close character work that, I don't know, a 19th century novelist might revel in. So, of course, the point is well taken that they will need to do that. But I guess my issue with it is, as you say, and I think perhaps we're saying the same thing, is that I think it just devalues and misunderstands what Tolkien's doing to say that narrative structures aren't storytelling, because, well, one, the works that relate to the Second Age in Tolkien's corpus are not mere narrative structures. They're doing something important in a storytelling sense, but it's just not character development or whatever he's thinking storytelling is. And I think obviously that's not going to be adequate for a television show. They're going to, as he says, they are going to have to develop scripts and things. But I think that I don't think that's. I guess ultimately, I don't think that the scriptwriters need to work against Tolkien, because hopefully they see that what Douthat calls his narrative structures are really they're like seeds they're seeds for further storytelling in that more traditional way that Douthat is talking about. They're seeds that can really bloom into narratives and characters and things, because there's that thematic depth there, I think, which is explored perhaps in those writings on that abstract level, but is there nonetheless. So, I think we need to broaden our sense of adaptation. I don't think adaptation need only to encompass novels. I think it can also be thought of as a creative endeavor which builds on other kinds of narrative, including Tolkien's kinds of narratives, which are often, which apart from The Lord of the Rings, are often quite different from the novelistic tradition, but no less, I think no less enthralling because of that, right? I mean, even the book,
right.
I was talking about before, The Children of Hurun is not really written like a novel at all. It's more like an Icelandic saga. It's full of illusions. It's full of it's the character development, if you like, of Turin himself is conducted through kind of short, pithy sentences about his state of mind. But you really have to infer a lot as a reader. You can't sort of rely on the book to tell you everything. And I think that's the case in a lot of the Second Age writings too. Even Eldarion and Arendis, which we've read, right? Which, if anything, right, is character, right? I mean, I think you would agree with that, having read that. I mean, that book really is about character. But even there, the way he tells the story is not going to be like a modern fantasy writer will tell the story with they essentially just, I mean, Martin literally tells you what his characters are thinking, because literally each chapter is from a different character's point of view, and it's just literally their perspective. I mean, it's like a bludgeon, and it's like, so.
And it completely misses the point of fiction.
Yeah, I mean,
I think.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. So I don't know what you think about all that, but yeah.
No, I think you're right. I mean, like, let's take the case of Eldarion and Arendis, where it is really all about the character, but the way that it's expressed is it's all in the stylization, right? It's all in the prose, and I think it would be a much lesser story if he was being very literal about
if he was simply what happened, stating what characters thought and did and think in every moment, which I feel like that's why, perhaps that's one reason that fantasy novels are so long. It's because there's this, I feel like fantasy writers have tried to be quote unquote literary, and the way that they've tried to do that is to essentially make their characters just completely transparent at all times to the reader in terms of what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what their perspective is. God, I hate that word. And so you get these enormous books full of, a sort of attempts at, I don't know, stream of consciousness, but it's usually just really bad. Yeah, it's not Virginia Woolf, and and so and then in one extreme, Martin's end, you literally get chapters named after the characters, given from their perspective, and it's just, as I said, it's kind of like a bludgeon. And Tolkien just does not work like that, And I mean, if that's what Douthat is thinking, sort of makes a fully fledged novel, as he sort of says, well, sorry, I think we've got to expand our sense of what adaptation means, and what content, quote unquote, is useful and interesting to adapt.
Yeah, and I and this maybe is not in the scope of the Douthat article, but I would really love it if people who are sort of adapting stories, or just generally making films or TV shows, I wish people were more experimental, more daring with their work. There's a sense that, like, in a novel, one probably needs things like narrative and story and character development, but one could get away with it if the prose sort of makes up for it, if the style is a part. But in film and certainly in TV, these things are absolutely necessary, and I think that's not true. If you look at, you said this about the Children of Hurun, which is it's not that narrative at all, and certainly Eldarion and Arendis is not that narrative either. The thing that comes to mind immediately, because I just watched it maybe like a month ago, is Werner Herzog's Heart of Glass. I think it's one of the greatest films I've ever seen, and it's certainly on Roger Ebert's great movies list. It's considered a great film, but it has no narrative. It's all told through sort of visions of a post-apocalyptic future of a sort of shepherd who has visions that are either, depending on your state of mind, visions of the future or visions of his own madness, told through the allegory of a decaying village, of a decaying Bavarian village who's lost the one person in there who has the ability to make ruby glass. This is a way to make a film that has the kind of state of mind that a story can sort of dip into, where one does not actually necessarily need to have concrete narratives or characters or anything of that sort, and yet the whole thing can function in the realm of something like music, right? It's all about mood and evocation. Kafka does this so well, and I think Tolkien does this quite well also. Again, it's all in the style, and that's yet again something that separates him. And I'm not sure that Douthat is necessarily catching on to that. One doesn't necessarily. It would be nice if people could sort of adapt that part of Tolkien as well. But I'm not going to keep my hopes up that we're going to have the sort of hyper artistic reading of his Second Age. But nevertheless, I think it could work with Tolkien.
That's true. Yeah. I agree, and certainly there are. He sort of pretends this kind of, he feigns this kind of like wankery, nerd wankery, some of the way down. He says, "My suspicion is someone who has both read the Silmarillion, a bash nerd voice." Well, okay, I'm not saying I've read every word. Blah blah blah. So I don't.
Yeah, that made me want to kill someone. Sorry, I shouldn't say that on the air.
my impression of Douthat is that he's a Lord of the Rings fan, but has not read widely or deeply in Tolkien's other writings, which is fine. But I wish he'd not pretend that he has, and certainly hasn't read Unfinished Tales, which quite frankly is where a lot of the good Second Age stuff is, and also Eldarion and Arendis, which is character focused. So he's not even right in that sense. But anyway,
right.
Anyway, the point is, I guess that those materials are difficult. Yes, like in Unfinished Tales, a lot of the we should talk at some stage about the history of Galadriel and Celeborn section, but to say that there's no, even in that section, which consists of Tolkien's ideas about one character, Galadriel, right? There is, in a sense, character development, right? There's a development of her character over time in his mind, which is basically what that whole section really details it in, some would say, excruciating depth. But there's a lot of material for Amazon to work there, even if there's not like a tome of sort of banal and boring conversations and attempts at, as I said, like the sort of bad attempts at stream of consciousness. There is nonetheless character development there, and there's a lot for Amazon to pull from, and no doubt they have pulled from it, because it seems like they do have the rights for pretty much everything that's related to the Second Age. It seems to be what they've paid for. So no doubt they have that. So I think he's, I don't know, I don't want to say, I'm not trying to attack this article because I disagree with it heavily, but I think it's an interesting point from which to think about some of these issues. And I guess my point about that section of his article would be that, first, that I think Tolkien's stories are not just outlines, even if they're not novels, right? There's not some dichotomy in storytelling between hashtag good storytelling and hashtag bad storytelling. And like good storytelling is the novel and bad storytelling is like just a few notes that, Tolkien left on the floor. I think that misunderstands his creative project, and also what those so-called notes actually achieve and what they're designed to do. Because as I said, a lot of them are actually, either partially complete stories like Eldarion and Arendis, or they are, explicitly thought of as sort of distant retellings of historical events, which is its own kind of storytelling. So Yeah, and the second point, I guess, is that we need to think about adaptation, I guess, in a broader way. It's not just about novels, and which is why I say that Tolkien doesn't really fit very easily, I think, in the modern fantasy genre, because apart from the Lord of the Rings, he's not writing tomes and enormous books. And people will say, well, he didn't finish them. But I'm like, well, even if everything that he had ever done was finished, I don't think we would have a corpus of enormous novels. I don't think that's what he was doing.
No.
We'd have the Lord of the Rings, and we'd have something very similar to what we have now as edited by his son, which is a set of disparate writings which are quite different from one another, and which are, if they're novels or novel-like, they're going to be fairly short, like the Children of Húrin. They're not going to be huge tomes, and otherwise they'll be like the Silmarillion. They'll be these sort of epitomes of of other of larger stories, because it's really part of the effect of his work that we're never quite there, right? We're always reminded that there is a story behind the story, that there are other poems, songs, tellings of events, and part of that magic, if you like, of Tolkien's world is that sense of distance, as well as the closeness that we sometimes feel in Lord of the Rings, right? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I mean that's really the discussion that I've been having with these scholars about metafiction, right?
No, I think that's
the metafiction
well
is in some sense central to what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I it provoked all these thoughts in me, this article. I mean, to bring it back to the show, I guess I just feel that, of course, they're going to have to adapt materials that are not traditionally adapted for television, and they will have to, in order to do that, quote unquote, make up a whole lot of stuff. But I mean, honestly, that people, I don't really see how novels are any different. I mean, yes, you have more to work with, but there's also less constraint in a sense, right? There's also perhaps room for greater creative possibilities, as you mentioned, perhaps in a more, I don't know, non-traditional modes of storytelling or whatever. And of course, there will be traditional storytelling in this series, but maybe there is room for something that Game of Thrones didn't do. I don't know, room for the evocation of the numinous in a way that was never possible in the Game of Thrones show. I mean, I would hope for something like that, but yeah, who knows?
Right. It's not clear to me that it's not clear to me that the show is gonna fail on that front. I think in fact a TV show might be the perfect genre for trying to adapt something like the Second Age, right?
True.
That's my initial hunch, at least. Like it's much rather that it's a series than it is a movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I don't necessarily get the hesitation. Despite the obvious hesitation that corporate greed ruins all, and
I've talked about that before.
Yeah. And we live in an age of consumerist excess and et cetera. But all that aside, it seems like exactly what you want is something like this. It's something like a series where a web series where you're not necessarily bound by the limitations of showing, say, like a movie in a theater, in like a cinema, or or even a TV show from back in the day when you had to fill up a certain amount of time with ads. It seems like you have so much room. Like I guess I don't know how they're going to do it, but one could theoretically, if you're just dropping a show on Amazon, I mean, you could have one episode that's like 15 minutes and another one that's like 40. And
exactly.
And you're not necessarily. It just seems like this is, it's not going to be perfect, but in terms of the forms that entertainment has taken in the past, this is definitely the one that you like. We definitely have this in the place that we want it to be in. It has the most chance of being successful, I think. right now than it does in any other time in the sort of past of our entertainment world. If someone in the 1960s said like, oh, let's adapt the second age stuff, I would be like, that's going to end up being horrible.
Yeah, there's certainly the creative and technological possibility to do it. Yeah.
So I mean, it does seem like everything is on its side. I don't really. I mean, like I said, the general mediocrity of everything aside, I see no reason to be cynical about it.
That is a problem, though. Yeah, that is a problem.
It does tend to get in the way.
And I'm certainly not saying that. Like, I'm not trying to defend the show. I mean, I'm sort of vaguely hopeful that it might be good and interesting. But I guess, my point is that adaptation, or that Tolkien's work is not to be, or should not be, misunderstood as as one novel and then a series of notes that are of little importance, and where storytelling is sort of that isn't real storytelling. That the only real storytelling that he ever did was The Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit, perhaps, and parts of the Silmarillion. I think that's incorrect and sort of is too narrow a view of what storytelling can mean, and therefore what adaptation can be of those stories. In
fact, I guess like before we had this conversation, I didn't even realize that was a legit view of Tolkien that people had.
Well, I think it's just
I didn't realize that was like a meme, that was out in the world, but it makes sense, I
guess. But, yeah. Sorry, go on. Yep.
No. Again, I mean, to bring up someone like Kafka, not that there are a huge number of similarities between Tolkien and Kafka, but one would be obviously insane if one were trying to sort of do a study of Kafka's entire works and said that his major things that one needed to focus on were the trial and the castle and America, which I believe are his novels. One would obviously say no. The things that are of the most importance are maybe the trial. But really, the soul of Kafka is in obviously the metamorphosis or the transformation, or however you want to translate it. But really, it's in the short stories, right?
Stories,
like the penal colony, the hunger artist, or even in the really short stories, like there's one about Poseidon. I think it's called Poseidon. It's like barely a page long, and it's about it's about Poseidon who is overworked and has too much paperwork to do and too much bureaucracy to deal with, and he can't even swim around and enjoy the seas that he so loves, and so there's stuff like that, and I think any Kafka scholar would say like, no, this is actually the soul of Kafka, and this is out from these like small short stories, we sort of can learn more about the longer works, and without something like Poseidon or the Tale of the Country Doctor or Josephine the Mouse, or we can't without these know the real the gist of the metamorphosis or the penal colony, and without that we can't know the gist of the even longer works like the trial or the castle, right? It goes from these, it's this misunderstanding that something that is short is lesser, and it's not the case. Often with these kinds of writers, the soul of them is contained in these extraordinarily concentrated works.
That's why I think,
and they're really beautiful. And I think it's the same with Tolkien.
Yeah, I think for me the soul of Tolkien is really in the Silmarillion, and even I would say even the Children of Húrin. I think is really is really a concentrated. That's a good way to describe that, right? I mean, it's still a novel, but it's fairly short, and it's it's certainly longer than a short story, but it is this concentrated just burst and of like creativity and imagination that and like feeling. I mean, that's how I, obviously it sort of, it's an important story for me, so that's how I take it. But and I think that's not to dismiss Lord of the Rings, but yeah, I think that's right. And I
but
think
it's
that's
like an inverted pyramid, right?
Yeah.
Where the longer works are to be understood in the context of the shorter works, but it's because the shorter works contain the pith of, it's the way of aphorism, right? That's how these kinds of, there are writers like James Joyce, right? There are writers who and the sort of musical analogy to that would be someone like Gustav Mahler, who seeks to contain the world in his symphonies, right? They're sort of by default long form people, right? The gist of their work is really gotten in the sort of the huge scope of it, right? The epicness of it.
You could even say the same about The Death of Ivan Ilyich for Tolstoy. I mean, I don't know if Tolstoy scholars would agree with that, but for me, reading that was similarly like a gut punch, like just this emotional, or for Dostoevsky, the Notes from the Underground, I guess is what I'm thinking.
Notes from the Underground, yes. Yes. You're absolutely right.
And, these works.
Or the nose for Gogol.
Yeah. And I think Tolkien, I mean, God, obviously we're not, I feel like I always have to give this caveat, even though I want to stop doing that, which is that Tolkien is different in many ways, but then, Tolstoy is very different from Kafka. So, I mean,
right.
These are kind of, but I think he belongs in the company of 20th century writers, regardless of, if you think that in terms of quality, and obviously he's doing something quite distinct and different, but he does belong more in a general, I think, 20th century context than in a 21st century fantasy context, which is where I think just this whole article of Douthat's just sort of misunderstands the point, because it's just completely misconstruing the nature of his creativity, I think. And I'm not saying he's doing that sort of willfully, but perhaps, he's claiming more knowledge and sort of about, I mean, this is what journalists often do. They claim more knowledge about certain things that they can lay claim to, or should lay claim to, I think.
Right.
But yeah. So
it's one thing, just a real quick side note. It's one thing that I always appreciate in Kafka and also in Monty Python, where if you watch their sketches, which to sort of stretch the analogy a bit, that's another group where you would never watch the Life of Brian or the Holy Grail, right? And think that the sort of study of Monty Python begins there. No, that's actually the end point of the study of Monty Python. If you wanted to really study them, you would begin with the Flying Circus and study their short sketches, right? Just notes on humor. And yet if you watch their sketches, even though they're technically finished and that they're aired, a lot of them are really unfinished in that they set up a premise and they get about halfway through, and I think they come to a point where they realize, the point has been got, and we don't know how to work away from here, so they just bring in someone like the knight with the rubber chicken, and they smack the person over the head, and they just say, and now for something completely different, so they just move on. It's this, we don't necessarily need complete narratives for the point of something and the beauty of something to go on, and often and there are many times where complete narratives actually sort of bring a work down after a certain point,
And I think sorry, go on.
No, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it's perhaps in that way that Tolkien is more, not avant-garde, but more experimental perhaps than some people would want to say. In that is he's using older literary forms, like, for example, the saga or even epic poetry, to tell stories in a sort of in a more concentrated way now. In the 20th century, and it's true that many of these things he didn't finish. Right, that's the great tragedy. But I think there is a similarity there. There's something going on. I mean, again, he's not doing the same thing as the Russian formalists or whatever, but there's something there, I think, that makes him distinct, at least in my mind, from, again, the modern fantasy genre, which I think is something distinct from Tolkien. Obviously related, but is distinct in its own thing. To draw that into discussions of adaptation of fantasy or of Tolkien is I guess it is fine. I mean, that comparison is certainly there to be had, but I think it needs to be couched in a wider context. I guess that's ultimately what we've been talking about. But I don't know if I sound crazy, but
no, I think you're right. Yeah. Maybe if you'll indulge me, I'll give one more analogy. And,
sorry. Go on.
The musical version of this would be something like Bach's St. Matthew Passion or something like that. Again, it's an epic work, but it's really just made up of a bunch of arias and other kinds of movements from other smaller works that he has done. It's a very old way of being an artist, I think. I think there used to be this way of being an artist that was more I don't want to say quantity over quality per se, but it was kind of like you lived your life as an artist and you made something all the time, and the bigger things that you made were compilations of the smaller things that you made. Right. But it's this notion of, I think Picasso said that the way you make a perfect painting is to become a perfect painter and then just paint. Right. But I think I think there's something about Tolkien, which is, that was a very avant-garde thing that was rediscovered in the 20th century. And it was a notion that was lost during the Romanticism and during the classical era.
For sure.
But it was very Baroque and Renaissance. And I think Tolkien had some of that in him. The way that he lived his life was very much of that ilk, right? Just you like had a thing in your head and you just kept producing things, like producing like notes or whatever, and the whole thing adds up to something that is greater than the sum of its parts. But
and by the way, leading off from that, I just want to say, like, notes, the whole notion of notes, like, that needs to be defended. I think notes are not like ephemeral; they're like central to creativity. And,
right.
As you will know, I'm sure, in music as well, and in everything, So to say, for example, that Christopher Tolkien just compiles a few of his father's notes and is both true and false at the same time. In some sense, it's true. In some ways. Although usually it's actually not like just notes, although there are sometimes. But even so, it's I think that's an important part of the creative process, and that's part of Tolkien's work. And I think even had he lived and finished everything, I think we would still have this sense of him as a kind of a note taker, as a as a compiler of ephemera in that sense. But that's central to the creative process, and even also to the reading process, maybe to some extent.
Right.
If you want to broaden the definition of notes to include, the appendices and sort of that paratextual material, which I think is so important to understanding Tolkien and actually central.
Right.
But yeah, sorry,
and I think
you off there.
And I think no. I think that's perfect, and I think that's why. I don't know. It just, again, we seem to be sort of harping on this a lot, but it seems to be yet another reason why he just doesn't fit the same kind of mold. And I think, like, modern fantasy writers, really a lot of modern writers in general, they still seem to be stuck in the Romanticism, right? They seem to be stuck in the age of the sort of artist as someone who produces great works, right? The producer of complete fictions and whole works.
The fantasy genre really
just,
has an obsession or a kink, that's around.
yeah,
The
you can say
complete
that
work,
again.
And it's not just got to be complete; it's got to be this enormous defining tome, and usually it's got to say something implicit about Tolkien, of course, and it's
right.
just
And they really do bring it to Tolkien, where there's I'm not even like a part of this world, like like in a sort of bona fide way, but but I can sense it, where they say like, what is the official thing here? What is the final thing? What's the most final thing that Tolkien said on this text or something like that? Like and it doesn't really matter. I think I see the same thing with someone like Bach, where I see the way that people talk about him, and it misses the point entirely, where Bach was, he was a scribbler, right? And I think Tolkien was the same way. He was someone who had music running through him at all times, and had certain sort of personal and professional obligations to sometimes put that music onto paper, and so did so, and scribbled it down, and dealt with life. But that's not the soul of his music. That's not the soul of his text. And I think Tolkien is the same way. And to sort of bring it back to the whole adaptation thing, I think again, this I may be giving the Amazon guys too much credit, but I almost certainly am giving them too much credit. But my hopeful view is that in the future we will transition to a world where we can sort of refine that, because again we have limitations. We had limitations with sort of like film distribution and sort of television distribution. We had limitations on how fast and loose we could play with narrative structures. But I hope with digital streaming we're moving back into a world where we can be as cavalier with our TV shows as people were allowed to be with their sort of compositions or their writing or their note taking. I wonder if we could move to a world where we could produce a TV show that is essentially like the film equivalent of taking notes, because the cost of production has been so reduced, and the way that people consume things. We consume content almost in a way that is almost perfect for someone who's a note taker, right? We don't consume content that much anymore in super long form ways. I don't know. I'm kind of like free associating here, but I guess I have this view of this that if Tolkien is going to survive, that it has to be super long term. It's going to have to be like Sherlock Holmes, and we have to survive many adaptations and many different kinds of adaptations, and it has to sort of turn into a kind of public domain free for all, right? If it survives, it can only survive through radical adaptation, and that's like a distant mountain, right? And it doesn't matter what the next step is per se, as long as it's one step closer towards that mountain. Sometimes it may be a lateral step, but right now it seems like this Amazon thing, it's one step forward, towards this distant mountain where we just have like a sort of public domain free for all with Tolkien, because I think that's the kind of thing that he deserves, because I think I don't know if that makes any sense. I think the more we move away from like the sort of official studio kind of like, we're going to create this sort of really structured narrative kind of thing, I think the more we move away from that, and more kind of like just a lot of people who are really passionate about the subject, like kind of just sticking around on it. I think the better it's going to be. I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
I agree. I mean, hopefully it's we really have to. Oh God, we have to see something from the show. We haven't even seen a still of a prop, let alone anything else. So we don't know quite the direction they're going in. I mean, I'll be disappointed if it's just a rehash of the film's aesthetics, but anyway, we'll see. But yeah, no, I think that's true, and I think that will be the case in time. We will get that sort of approach to adaptation. It'll be a lot more Sherlock Holmes-like, I think. Yeah, I guess the final thing I wanted to talk about was this notion that there are two core strengths of the genre, fantasy genre. And again, I don't think Tolkien can be sort of
too.
Limited to this. Yeah. And Douthat writes, quote, first, because if you he says, okay, I'll start a sentence before. Then there's the more specific problem, Douthat says, that adapting fantasy world prehistory tends to take you away from the two core strengths of the genre. End quote. Note here. I don't think Tolkien's Second Age is a prehistory to the Lord of the Rings in quite the sense that Douthat imagines that it is, because Tolkien's prehistory, such as it was always the first thing that was there. That was the history, right? The Lord of the Rings is a kind of later addition. It's not that Tolkien wrote the Lord of the Rings and then went back and wrote a prehistory like Martin did. That's not what happened. So just first note there. And then to continue that quote, first, because if you move backward in time from a moment chosen originally by the author as a liminal end of magic, return of magic moment, you're likely to end up somewhere a little more boring and banal, either a point in the fantasy world's history where magic is ubiquitous or a point where it's simply absent, both of which offer less of a frisson than the departure of Galadriel or the birth of Daenerys Targaryen's dragons. I don't know what to make of this. It seems a very limiting kind of perspective on, well, firstly what fantasy can be, but then even what the role of magic is in fantasy, and Tolkien's story. Like, I don't even know how to categorize the Second Age in that scheme. Is it an end of magic? Is it a return of magic? Is it like a point in the fantasy world's history where magic is ubiquitous? I mean, it's neither, right? It's like, it's neither completely absent nor is it ubiquitous, and that's always the case in Tolkien's world. It's always there, but it's never. It's not a sort of it's not a strong magic system that's sort of readily visible and sort of utilized by a school of wizards or something. That's really.
Well, I can't speak for I mean, he said a few things in this article that I'm not versed enough in fantasy to know if that's like a legit way of analyzing it. Though in general, I recoil at all sorts of structures of analysis. He said that earlier in the article too, that he said something like the first thing that fantasy does is that it retells the origin story of the modern world or something. And
how very specific.
I also, I also had a problem with that. Not least because I think like you said, it's a very specific origin story. One that I don't care for very much. But anyway, I don't know. I don't find that again in Tolkien. I don't find that the magic thing is like it's not really that present to me. In most or all of his stories, correct me if I'm wrong. I find that the magic is used, if anything, like a sort of plot device, like kind of a kind of like a plot, not a necessity, but kind of like a we can sort of speed this thing up here, or like we can use magic in the form of immortality to bring home a point about something like ethics or philosophy. But it's not necessarily it's not a plot device per se. I don't know. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, no, I think I get what you're saying. I mean, obviously the whole arc of history in Tolkien's pseudo history is sort of the gradual decline of the elves, which is of course the whole point behind the making of the rings. But then that that's a sort of a return of magic moment, kind of, I guess. Or I'm not quite sure how to think about the Second Age in terms of this, scheme, because I mean, it's not really an end of magic moment, but magic hasn't disappeared, but it's not ubiquitous either. I mean, the rings, I guess, are magical artifacts in a sense, and they're designed certainly to. I mean, what's interesting about them is that the 3 elven rings are designed to prevent, or to at least postpone, the sort of inevitable decline of the the inevitable entropy of the world, really. Not only the decline of the elves, but death and sort of entropy per se. So they maintain these places in a kind of stasis, So, there's a whole...
And so magic is kind of an allegory for
yes, magic, exactly. It's an allegorical or thematic, symbolic kind of...
it's not magic as Deus Ex Machina. It's a very precise use.
So, I mean, I guess that fits into his point where it's like magic is ubiquitous, but I don't think that means it offers less of a frisson. I mean, that's a core kind of thematic point of the Second Age, and I don't know. I think quite an interesting. I mean, and he talks about the departure of Galadriel. Well, this whole story is in part about Galadriel and why that all happens. I mean, it's kind of central to the whole thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think about this.
I don't either. I will say, I mean, just real quick. I mean, there's a way that I've heard Salman Rushdie talk about it this way, and I think I've also read Gabriela Garcia Marquez talk about it in this way. But the problem with magical realism in general is that the lesser practitioners, and I think this applies to fantasy as well, the lesser practitioners don't understand the sort of rules of engagement when it comes to something like this. The greater practitioners like Rushdie, they know that you can set up whatever rules you want, but once you've set up the rules of the universe, you have to follow them, quite precisely, and it doesn't behoove you to sort of play fast and loose and sort of have this sort of loose thing that's just called magic, sort of in the universe, where it may be a magical universe, but it is a precisely magical universe that is not that much of a leap away from our naturalistic one. Certain rules may be abolished for the sake of some reason that actually has to be a fairly precisely limited reason, right?
Yep.
And that's how you keep the sort of that's how you keep the story tight, and that's how you keep it sort of relevant and real, I guess. I don't know, for lack of better words. And I think a lot of fantasy sort of lacks that, right? It uses magic as a sort of end all be all or whatever. It's a sort of magic. Literally magic key. So I'm not sure. Like you said, I'm not sure what to make of, because I think, again, one of the great benefits of Tolkien is that he does not use magic in this way. It's used in very sort of precise and precisely limited ways, I don't know. I'm lost too. The sentence where magic is ubiquitous or a point where it's simply absent. I don't think that. Both of which offer less of a frisson than the departure of Galadriel, at the birth of. I guess maybe the fact that I have no idea what this means. the birth of Daenerys Targaryens. I feel like I'm saying a slur here. I have no idea what that means. So maybe that's hindering my parsing of the sentence. But could you help me out here?
That's okay. Well, I think Daenerys Targaryen is meant to be her name, but yeah, she's a character in Game of Thrones. Yeah.
and what exactly is the frisson of that moment?
Dragons have been dragons were thought just extinct, and she has she finds these perhaps magical dragon eggs that eventually hatch, and she has these dragons. So it's a kind of literal return of this mythological or magical creature to the world, and so he's sort of thinking that so a world just full of dragons would kind of be banal, and I kind of agree with that, but that's certainly not such obvious displays of like magic or mythology. Mythological creatures are really not encountered in Tolkien at any point, I think.
Yeah, that seems to be fundamentally, to even compare the two, seems to be fundamentally misunderstanding the former.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, so.
But I feel a bit bad saying that because it feels like we're not meeting the critic at his battlefield. We're sort of just saying like you're on the wrong battlefield.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think we can say that. I mean,
okay, yeah, you're fine with that. Yeah,
I mean, pretty much. I mean, that's pretty much what we've been saying the whole time.
Yeah, we could put that in the episode title and just.
Yep. Good idea. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't
know. I mean, maybe it's worth reaching out to Ross Douthat and saying because I really hate to not if he listens to this or something and says like, oh, you just don't even understand what I'm trying to say with this article. I just kind of read it and I don't know. It seems like he doesn't understand the gist of Tolkien.
No, yeah. Yeah, so if by chance he does happen to listen to this, maybe we'll get in touch. Certainly not personal or anything like that. It's just a
of course not.
A sense that that perhaps this article doesn't quite understand Tolkien's creative process as really we've understood it, and also creative outputs. It's not just the Lord of the Rings and a bunch of notes. It's not what it is, nor even what it was intended to be, I think, at any point, really.
Yeah. And the ending, I couldn't also parse that about Claudius.
Let me have a look. Let me see. So, Claudius. Sorry, our accents. Gosh. Maybe with the.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're right. It's just the vowel character of vowels in Australian accents is quite different, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes I mishear things in American accents. So he's talking about maybe with the right overripe script, you could make this outline into an effective Claudius or succession style portrait. So he's talking about the Targaryen. So obviously you're not familiar with Game of Thrones, and that sort of thing.
I guess not. I am familiar with Claudius, but I'm not. I don't know what succession is.
Yeah, Succession is some recent TV show, but pardon me, I'm not quite sure exactly. I think it's also about
I gotta get hip to all this modern
backstabbing.
I guess maybe that's why I didn't understand. I felt like I didn't understand this article.
Yeah, I mean the stuff
Game
about
of Thrones, and I don't.
The stuff about the Targaryens, won't make any sense. But I mean, I haven't read the book, but I think he's right that it's kind of a civil war within this one family, and that's really all of which consists really only of that story plot, and they fight with dragons. So I agree to the extent that a show with sort of a warring dynasty using dragons may get a bit tiresome, but it certainly I think has less, to use his word, frisson than than the possible Tolkien backstory as he thinks about it. But so I guess he's pointing that final paragraph is that the Targaryen family in the Game of Thrones storyline is like the Julia Claudians in I, Claudius, backstabbing and fighting. And I suppose his point is that it may not be, much more interesting than that, really, because it doesn't really offer anything more than a sort of a turgid or a than a turgid political story.
Right.
And we've already seen that in Game of Thrones. And so I kind of agree with that point, but I'm disposed to because I don't really like Game of Thrones anyway. But, I think
that puts me in quite a damper, I guess, because he says earlier, if I have this part highlighted here, if Amazon is going back to the downfall of Numenor for its prequel, it's chosen another liminal moment in the token corpus, a great transformation in the order of his world that's actually bigger in certain ways than the evanescence of elven magic at the end of Lord of the Rings. I do wonder, like, we sort of been talking about how he maybe doesn't quite understand Tolkien the way that we do. Not that we get it better than he does, but I think we have maybe a different. Well, you might. I certainly have no.
I make no claims.
You are actually a legit a legit Tolkien person. I make no claims of that sort. But I think we have maybe a different understanding of Tolkien than.
Let's put it that way. Yes.
Yeah. But I was reading this and I was filled with a sense of dread that perhaps this is the first time that this is maybe incredibly naive of me, but this is actually the first time that I was reading something and thought, oh Christ, the Amazon people are going to look at this like it's a prequel.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Did you get that sense too? I was reading this and I was like, you know what? I never thought of it this way, and yet that seems like the way that the normies, I guess, I don't know. I don't want to use that word because I'm sure that the kids these days have a they're going to say that's the wrong way to use it, but the sort of Tolkien normies are going to look at this like it's a prequel and maybe have some sort of overtly political thing to say about it, and I think the sort of literary world that we sort of look at Tolkien in, like we talked about in the very first episode, I think, about how we really see him as having a lot more to do with Milton or Blake, than anything. I was reading this and I was thinking, oh Christ, of course they're not gonna think about it like that. It's they're gonna think about it like it's a prequel for Lord of the Rings. And
there are certainly. The elves forged the rings of power. That's probably going to be the major plot point of the first season or something. So certainly, yes, there's an obvious link, but as a literary story, I think to use that word, I think the Second Age needs to stand on its own. It's different to Lord of the Rings. It's a different period in the history, but it's also a different kind of, to use Douthat's word, frisson about it. It's a different story. It's not a quest narrative. It's it does have more of a political dimension in some respects. So it's different to the Third Age. It's different to the Lord of the Rings. It's not about the evanescence of elven magic, really. It's about the futile attempt of elven magic to sort of to delay entropy and change, and that has all sorts of interesting thematic and symbolic kind of implications that the show could draw out and work with. So it's quite distinct, I think, from the Lord of the Rings. And I hope they don't treat it merely as a prequel. I hope they treat it as its own distinct, a story with its own distinct character. Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah.
But interesting article, difficult article in some ways. But I think we've I think we've gone into some depth anyway about with regards to some parts of it anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the conversation that you hope to have, but I hope it's a conversation you're happy to have.
No, absolutely. I don't mean it. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, we've discussed those parts of the article that are, I think, interesting and thought provoking, even if I sort of kind of disagree with some of the implications of what he says, or some of the assumptions maybe. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward what he and other commentators, I guess, write about the show, and I guess we'll see once it begins, and once we get some sense of what it will be like, what sort of commentary becomes available. But of course, we will talk about the show as it comes out, as information comes out about it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think that's it really. Yeah, in terms of my thoughts, I mean, just somewhat frustrating article, but interesting at the same time, which is always always the best sort of article, I guess, in the end. But yeah, how about you?
Well, I mean, one takeaway is that I guess I probably need to eventually watch Game of Thrones. Is that do I need to? This has literally been a thing since it first started coming out when I was probably in high school or something. I'm trying to think of when Game of Thrones first started coming out. I don't remember, but I always used to just, I have all these friends who are like, you just got to watch it. It's awesome. And I was like, you know what? I just don't care. And I know I'm not going to like it. And, to the argument that like, oh, you just have to watch it or read it because, otherwise how do you know you don't like it? And I just like, you know what? I think I know.
Yeah.
And reading this and maybe not understanding about half of the article because I don't understand the Game of Thrones side of it. I finally got the sense,
Yeah, my apologies.
No, it's all good.
I should have sort of thought about that.
No. Yeah. It's all good. But I started reading it. I was thinking, what? Maybe I ought to. If for no other reason, then I could, more effectively criticize it.
It's an interesting piece of fair? It's an interesting piece of culture, and quite frankly, I mean, if you want to get a sense of who the Targaryens are, go and read the Wikipedia. I mean, who cares, But I mean, if you want to get a sense of it as a kind of cultural phenomenon, then I guess go watch it. But I mean, it's I don't know. It's not my favorite thing in the world either. So,
yeah.
But who knows? Maybe you'll love it. I don't know.
Yeah, I doubt it. I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, we've said this every which way on both on this episode and previous ones, but
yeah.
I think I really only like Tolkien because I really do think of him as being on a sort of literary spectrum, and it's frustrating when I read other people. Of course, when you really like anything, when you really like an author or a composer or a painter, even you develop a personal reason for liking that person, and when other people sort of have totally different metrics on which they sort of analyze that person, it can be a frustrating experience, and that's sort of what I felt reading this article. It's like no, this none of this has anything to do with Tolkien, right? It's again, it's Milton, it's Blake, it's Shakespeare. It's not whatever the Targaryens or whatever it is. I don't know. It's just not the same thing, but whatever. We'll find out. The Amazon series might
for sure
it one way or another.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm hoping there's some literary adapters on the Amazon team, but
well, we can hope, but we'll come back to the show and we'll come back to articles like this that we find interesting or provocative.
Yeah,
and
it'll certainly be interesting that it seems like this article was a one-off in that it was actually it seemed like a deep contending with what is to come.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Most articles that I've read about the Amazon series so far have sort of been, bitching about the budget or something like that. So,
or about brown characters or something. Oh,
right. So this actually seemed to contend with the content of it, not in the sort of modern use of the word content, but the actual sort of the meat of it. God, and I hope this will be the content. Yeah.
But I hate the corporatized takeover of language, content, like
I know.
etc. Yeah.
But hopefully there will be more like this, as we get closer to the release of it, and we get more legit people who can read and write, actually writing about it, and not just sort of people looking for the Twitter clicks.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, look, I like Douthat is a very interesting thinker, actually. I think I said something mean about him before, which is like journalists always, whatever. I mean, but he is interesting. He's a very smart bloke, and to use an Australianism. And, it'd be very interesting to see what he thinks about the show. I mean, maybe we'll have him on at some stage if he would deign to stoop to our meager level. But, his thoughts are interesting, even when I disagree with them, as I do here in some respects.
We're talking about him, right? It's not like last time. I think it was last time. Maybe it was 2 times ago. We sort of had a moment where we paused what we were actually talking about to sort of talk shit about talk some shit about the Twitter trends about the budget for the Amazon show. And we had nothing to say about it because it was just we had stuff to sort of trash it, but we had nothing really to contend with it because these weren't real thinkers. It was just a bunch of people on Twitter sort of whining about one thing or another. So of course, I mean,
that's to be expected.
Right. So of course it goes without saying that even though it seems like we've largely been critical of this article, he's obviously like a capital R, like, real dude, and I don't know much about him, but even if I disagree with what I read about in this article, I like him. I like people who actually say real things that are worth contending with. So
absolutely. Hopefully there'll be some good thought around the show, but any case, I guess we should leave it there and let you get to bed or whatever. I'm going to go get a bottle of wine tonight, and whatever you do in Minnesota or wherever you are. I always get the state wrong.
No, that's fair. Wisconsin, but it's the same
that's
thing.
The one. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Sorry, God, I always get that wrong.
No, it's all good.
That sort of quasi-Nordic.
It's a shame that you're just at the time of day to get a bottle of wine, and I'm just in the time of day where I've had my beer and my cocktails. So
well, we're definitely gonna do a wine episode one of these days. So
we'll
certainly do that.
One of these days you'll actually hear Benjamin. Or Ben, what do you prefer actually? Is it Benjamin
really?
or Ben?
I don't mind. Yeah, either is good.
Yeah. Well, what do you call yourself?
Well, Ben, I guess usually.
Ben,
although lately in emails I've been going by Benjamin. Actually, I don't know. It just
fair enough.
Elevates my. Maybe I should say Dr. Benjamin.
Yeah. So let's rewind here. So maybe to the listeners here, one of these days when we do a wine episode, we can actually hear Dr. Benjamin stoop to the level of Sweether here, and we can actually it's because it's been asymmetric warfare here. I always record these. It's midnight here, so you get to hear Dr. Benjamin fresh, after his coffee and his lunch, and here I am, after a big beer and a Negroni and a Scotch. So here we are. And it's always like this. So one of these days, Ben, we're gonna have to right this wrong and see
Yep.
we have to do a Lord of the Rings drinking game or something, and see what you can see what you can come up with after.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Look, yeah, I'm glad I didn't talk about this article while inebriated. I think, or tipsy. I think I would have been even more unfriendly, which I don't like to be. But alcohol just brings out the beast, brings out the I don't know. It's
well,
it's
now
not
you're
always
just
good, but
now you're just tempting me. Like, we have to make this. We have to make this happen.
True. Yes, well, no, definitely that's a promise I'll definitely follow through with at some stage soon. Perhaps next time. Yeah.
We can pick someone who's dead or at least inactive, so you can be as mean as you want.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that sounds good. All right. Well, I better let you head off. And
all right.
I will go and get my bottle of wine. And yeah, it's been great. Interesting discussion. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time.
Peace out.